An unexpected news shook the Vatican. Pope Francis has been hospitalized, and his health condition has become the center of attention worldwide. The fragility of the leader of the Catholic Church was already noticeable, but few imagined that his condition could deteriorate so quickly. Before being taken to the hospital, Francisco left words that now sound even more significant. What did he say? What does this hospitalization represent for the Church? The answers could change the course of the history of the papacy. If you wish for his recovery, leave in the comments. Strength. Pope Francis. In recent months, the Pope, at 88 years old, had already shown signs of fatigue. His public commitments continued normally, but his demeanor revealed a silent struggle against time. The labored breathing, the weakened voice, and the long pauses during speeches were increasingly evident. Persistent pain forced him to use a wheelchair on several occasions, and his respiratory problems have been known for years. Still, Francisco did not slow down, insisting on sticking to his schedule. But something changed drastically. During a recent ceremony, her condition became impossible to ignore. His voice faltered, and each word seemed to require superhuman effort. Moments later, the doctors made the decision that many had already anticipated. The pontiff would need to be hospitalized immediately. The hospitalization raised an inevitable question. Is the Vatican prepared for what might happen next? Shortly before being taken to the hospital, Francisco reportedly made a remarkable statement, which now takes on new significance given the circumstances. What exactly did he mean? In the Vatican, the atmosphere is one of apprehension. The concern is not only with the Pope's health, but with the impact this situation may have on the leadership of the Church. Over time, all institutions go through transitions, but this moment seems charged with something greater. The eyes of the world are turned towards Rome, and the big question remains: are we facing one of the most critical moments in the history of the Catholic Church? The fragility of Pope Francis became evident. His voice no longer had the same strength, and each speech required pauses to catch his breath. What seemed like just an episode of fatigue soon evolved into a more concerning condition. The cough intensified, accompanied by a low fever, a clear sign that something more serious was happening. Given the deterioration, the Vatican doctors made an urgent decision. Francisco would need to be hospitalized. On February 14th, the Pope was taken to the Agostino Gemelli Polyclinic Hospital in Rome to undergo a series of detailed examinations. The announcement caught many by surprise, as the Vatican had been downplaying his condition until then. The news caused great commotion, raising doubts about the real severity of the case. The tests brought a concerning diagnosis: polymicrobial infection in the respiratory tract. This type of infection is particularly dangerous in the elderly, as it involves multiple microorganisms attacking at the same time, making treatment more complex. It was not just a simple cold or a common infection, but a condition that required continuous monitoring and intensive care. The doctors initiated an aggressive treatment, including broad-spectrum antibiotics, corticosteroids, and anti-inflammatories to contain the inflammation and prevent the infection from advancing. In addition, oxygen therapy was necessary to ensure adequate breathing levels. But the biggest challenge was another one. In elderly patients, the immune system responds more slowly, making any respiratory infection a potentially fatal risk. Therefore, the medical team established a strict surveillance protocol, constantly assessing the Pope's condition. Now time has become the decisive factor. How long will he need to stay hospitalized? Will his body be able to respond to the treatment before the infection worsens? The first few days would be crucial. If the infection irreversibly affected the lungs, the risk of severe pneumonia would increase drastically, putting his life in danger. Despite the weakness, Francisco remained calm and cooperative with the doctors, demonstrating the resilience that has always marked his papacy. But his recovery did not depend solely on medication. His body needed to endure. With the evolution of the situation, the Vatican went into maximum alert. What would happen if Francisco couldn't recover? The future of the Church was at stake. The prolonged absence of Pope Francis raised a delicate question. How would the Church handle an indefinite period without its supreme leader? As soon as the news of the hospitalization spread, cardinals and Vatican advisors gathered to ensure that the administration of the Holy See continued to function. Although hospitalized, Francis was still the highest authority of the Church, and the possibility of a slow recovery generated uncertainty about the future of ecclesiastical governance. The first impact was the immediate cancellation of his official schedule. Mass, audiences, and high-level commitments were postponed or taken over by other important clerical figures. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Vatican Secretary of State, has taken on some of the Pope's duties, something that has reignited debates about the stability of the papacy in times of crisis. Behind the scenes, the situation was viewed with concern. The health of the pontiff had been a cause for concern for years, and now a new question arose. If his recovery were slow, could Francis delegate even more functions, or even consider a resignation? Officially, the Vatican does not comment on this possibility, but the memory of Benedict XVI's resignation in 2013 has been debated again among specialists and religious figures. Meanwhile, at the Agostino Gemelli Polyclinic Hospital, doctors monitored the Pope 24 hours a day. His condition required caution, and any change could directly impact the administration of the Church. Outside the Vatican, the commotion was global. As soon as the hospitalization was confirmed, millions of faithful expressed support on social media and organized prayer chains. In Rome, St. Peter's Square became a vigil point, where hundreds of people gathered to pray for the Pope's recovery. Candles were lit, rosaries were raised, and prayers were said in various languages, reflecting the diversity of devotees who follow his pontificate. The support came from various religions. Jewish, Muslim, and Protestant leaders sent messages of solidarity. The Dalai Lama, in an official statement, expressed wishes for recovery and highlighted the importance of Francisco in interreligious dialogue. Heads of state and political figures also reacted. The President of Italy, along with Latin American leaders, expressed concern and emphasized the Pope's role as a symbol of global unity and peace. Now, the main question is, will Francisco be able to return to his activities? Or is the Catholic Church about to enter an unexpected period of transition? The news of Pope Francis's hospitalization generated a global wave of support. On social media, hashtags like #StrengthPopeFrancis dominated the most talked about topics, demonstrating the mobilization of the faithful. Catholic broadcasters around the world dedicated special programming to update the public and encourage prayers for his recovery. But the big question remains, will Francisco be able to recover and resume his duties without restrictions? While prayer chains continue in various parts of the world, doctors are working tirelessly to ensure their recovery. The Pope's hospitalization not only affected the Church spiritually, but also reorganized the entire administrative structure of the Vatican. With a packed schedule for the coming days, Francis would have commitments of great importance, including the Jubilee audience and the Sunday Mass, events awaited by thousands of faithful. However, his health condition made his participation impossible. Given the situation, the Vatican issued an official statement confirming the suspension of all the pontiff's activities until he is discharged and able to resume them. The impact was immediate. The Wednesday General Audience, a moment when the Pope traditionally addresses pilgrims in St. Peter's Square, had to be cancelled. The Sunday Mass, one of the most anticipated events of the week, was also affected, leading the Holy See to appoint cardinals to represent him. Behind the scenes at the Vatican, the suspension of the agenda led to an emergency restructuring. Advisors reorganized meetings planned months in advance, including a crucial meeting with church leaders in Latin America, where social projects and strategies for strengthening faith in the region would be discussed. Even hospitalized, Francisco stayed informed, Close sources reported that he requested detailed updates on his canceled commitments, demonstrating his concern for the continuity of the church's mission. However, the doctors were firm in recommending complete rest, warning that any effort could compromise his recovery. Now the question hanging over the Vatican is, how long will the Pope need to resume his duties? Official statements indicate that he is stable and responding well to treatment, but the main challenge remains the control of the polymicrobial infection. This complex condition may require a long recovery period, depending on the body's response. To avoid complications such as pneumonia, Francisco is undergoing intense respiratory physiotherapy and a rigorous antibiotic treatment. The medical team continues to monitor his progress, but there is still no definitive forecast for his return to leading the church. In the face of uncertainty, the church and its faithful are anxiously awaiting new medical bulletins. The future of France's papacy may be being redefined at this very moment. Despite the evident fatigue, sources close to the Vatican report that Pope Francis maintains a good spirit. He remains conscious, follows religious readings, and keeps in touch with his closest advisors. However, the doctors insist on the need for absolute rest, which means there is still no forecast for his return to official activities. The duration of the hospitalization remains uncertain. Specialists say that full recovery may take weeks, depending on the body's response to treatment. The coming days will be crucial to determine if Francisco will be able to fully resume his duties, or if it will be necessary to adjust his schedule and redistribute responsibilities within the Vatican. Although the medical bulletins bring an optimistic tone, the pontiff's fragility raises inevitable doubts. Will Francisco be able to recover in time to resume his position, or will his health force him to reconsider his tenure? This uncertainty has reignited an old debate within the Catholic Church. How can a pope's health impact the future of the Vatican? It is not the first time a pontiff has faced medical complications during his tenure, and as history shows, these situations can lead to drastic decisions, including resignation. The most recent case that serves as a comparison is that of Benedict XVI, who resigned in 2013, citing a lack of strength to continue leading the church. Although his health was not in critical condition, his advanced age and the difficulty of performing his duties led him to an unprecedented decision in the modern era. His resignation set a historic precedent. A pope can abdicate if he realizes he is no longer able to perform his duties adequately. On the other hand, there is the example of John Paul II, who chose to remain in office until the end of his life, even facing serious health problems. Diagnosed with Parkinson's and other ailments, he gradually lost mobility and speech, but became a symbol of resistance and devotion. Now, with Francisco's hospitalization, the dilemma resurfaces. Will he follow the example of John Paul II, fighting to remain in office despite the limitations? Or will he consider resignation, as Benedict XVI did? For now, there is no official indication that Francisco is considering resigning, but his recovery will be decisive in determining the direction of the Church in the coming months. If his health does not allow him to continue, the Church will need to prepare for a possible leadership transition. And the question that many are already beginning to ask is the Vatican ready for a new conclave sooner than expected? The future of the Catholic Church may be about to change. The fragility of Pope Francis has placed the Vatican in a decisive moment. With conservative and progressive factions vying for influence, his health could shape the direction of the Church in the coming years. While his recovery continues without a definitive timeline, the debate about succession and continuity intensifies. At 88 years old, facing recurring health issues, Francisco may need to delegate more responsibilities or, in an extreme scenario, consider resignation. Behind the scenes, the topic of succession is already on the agenda. Cardinals and religious leaders are beginning to prepare for a possible conclave, should his health not allow him to continue in office. Who could be the next pope? Two factions vie for influence: the progressives, who support Francis' reforms and advocate for greater inclusion in the Church. The conservatives, who desire a return to stricter and more traditional stances. The choice of the next pope could change the course of the Church for decades. Since 2013, Francis has become one of the most popular figures in recent history, known for his humility and commitment to social causes. If he cannot continue, the Church will face the challenge of maintaining that connection with the faithful. Even while hospitalized, Francisco made an official statement, bringing both relief and concern. "I still need treatment for my bronchitis." The message reinforced that his recovery is not complete, and that the Vatican is still facing a period of uncertainty. The question remains, will Francis return to lead the Church, or is the Vatican about to enter a new era? Despite showing signs of improvement, Pope Francis's treatment remains strict, with no discharge date in sight. The polymicrobial infection that led to his hospitalization still requires constant monitoring, as any complication could pose a new risk to his health. In his statement, Francisco expressed gratitude for the global support, saying he was moved by the messages of affection and prayers coming from all parts of the world. Even weakened, he maintains contact with his advisors, but the doctors insist that he focus exclusively on recovery, avoiding unnecessary exertion. Since the hospitalization was confirmed, a wave of emotion has swept over the world. Churches around the world organized masses and prayer chains, while faithful gathered in St. Peter's Square, lighting candles and holding rosaries in an act of faith and hope. On social media, hashtags like #Strength for Pope Francis and #Let Us Pray for the Pope dominated global topics, reflecting Francisco's importance to millions of people. Religious leaders from various faiths expressed solidarity, including the Dalai Lama, rabbis, and Muslim sheikhs, reinforcing the global influence of the pontiff. Beyond the religious sphere, Francisco is recognized for his role in conflict mediation and defense of the poor, making his absence felt even in the international political arena. World leaders expressed concern, highlighting his importance as a symbol of peace and social justice. But, while his recovery continues without a defined timeline, the Vatican remains cautious about his return. The big question remains, will Francisco be able to resume his duties, or will his health require irreversible changes? If his recovery is prolonged, he may be forced to reduce his activities. And if his condition does not allow for a full return, the Church may be facing a historic transition, a moment that would redefine the course of the papacy. The next few weeks will be decisive, and the world eagerly awaits answers.